Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Self Publishing Insiders. I'm Jim Azevedo. I lead the marketing team here at Draft to Digital. And today, my guest is Skye MacKinnon. So, this is going to be an interesting conversation. And I've been looking forward to this for a long time because I really don't know that much about how that world of translations works. So, book translations are one of the most powerful and misunderstood ways for indie authors to grow their business. If you do it right, they can open the door to entirely new markets and revenue streams. But if done wrong, they can cost you thousands of dollars with little to show for it. So, how do you know when you're actually ready to translate your books? Which markets should you target first? And with AI tools on the rise, is it finally possible to do this faster and cheaper? And would you want to? Or are there risks that authors aren't even thinking about? So today, I'm thrilled that we're joined by Skye MacKinnon, a Scottish author who loves helping other writers succeed with their self-publishing adventures. We were talking about this backstage a little bit, but after a career in journalism and marketing, she now writes romance full-time as USA Today best-selling author Skye MacKinnon. And to relax, she also publishes children's books under her pen name, Isla Winter. Having lived in various countries before settling in Scotland, she has a unique international perspective on publishing. Her books have been translated into 5 languages, including German, which is important because we're going to talk about that. She's also an active member of the indie community and is passionate about publishing wide. Today, we'll tap into Skye's expertise to break down what works, what doesn't, and how to approach translations the smart way. That was a long introduction, but welcome, Skye. We're
Oh,
so happy you're here.
thanks for having me. This is a pleasure.
Oh, we're delighted to have you here. So, as I mentioned backstage, as we were enjoying our snacks and drinks and stuff, I have a ton of questions, and then we're probably going to get some questions from our audience as well. And since I have so many questions and it's just a limited amount of time, let's just get into it, shall we?
Let's do that.
All right. So you offer consulting for authors, and you've been doing that for years, and you just launched a Kickstarter campaign for the second edition of your book, Self-Publishing in German. So I'm curious, what pushed you into taking that first step into helping your fellow authors?
It was kind of
Not,
natural. I think I just been in lots of different author groups from the start, and we had always been chatting amongst each other. And at some point, I realized that I had a lot to share, and that people kept coming back to me and asking me more questions. And my messenger was always blowing up with like lots of inquiries and how do I do that? And um, so at some point, a friend of mine who was doing this author coaching was like, you should do this too because you have so much to share. And it took me forever to actually then have the confidence to say, okay, this is actually worth it. um, but I did, and I've been loving it. It's been a few years now, quite a few years, and I've had chats with 300 something authors. I looked it up recently from across the world, and it's just
wow.
amazing being able to just deep dive into topics when you're like on Facebook or in different groups. You can always just touch on the surface. While if you talk one to one with someone, you can really dive into the topic. Same as with the book, self-publishing in German. That's what I did when I first published it, like really deep diving into that topic because there's so much to talk about.
I'm
Um,
sure. So when it comes to translation specifically, was that a strategic move for you, or did you just kind of stumble into translations and helping authors with translations? I'm curious about that.
so I went wide in 2018. After first being exclusive for a year, we don't talk about that year. And then
It's
I
okay.
I explored all the different retailers, the distributors. I had done different formats. I'd like done audiobooks. I started on fiction apps, and I was basically looking what's the next step now because I wrote a lot in the first few years that I published, and I had a big backlist, and I was just feeling like this has more potential to still be used more, to reach more people. And translations just felt like the natural next step. Now I'm bilingual, so it does help there that my first
Sure.
idea was like, let's do German because I speak that language. So actually, I have an affinity for that market. and I can research all of that. But I think having those translations in general is just a good next step for anyone who is at that stage where they feel like their books can sell more and reach more audience, but they feel like they've probably exhausted the audiences they can in the English speaking market.
Okay, that makes sense. Skye, just really quickly, I'm gonna ask you, can you scooch forward just a little bit? There's some
Am I
comments
too
from
quiet
the
again?
yeah, it's kinda your voice is coming in and out just a little bit. It's not cutting off, it just goes from quiet to a little bit louder.
Okay, sorry.
No, 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 that's okay.
New technology, new microphone.
I
This was
know,
supposed to make everything better.
trust me, you can have a million podcasts, and on the million and first podcast, for some reason, like something will happen. Like I think it's technology's way of saying, "Hey, don't get too comfortable. I can still
Yeah.
screw you up." So it's okay. um, okay, so with that, I'm curious. At what point should an indie author start to like seriously consider translations? What signals should they keep an eye out for? I mean, could it be
Um,
any level, or would you recommend that they wait a bit,
mhm.
get
I
get their
don't
feet?
think I don't think it's something you should do right at the start when you've just
Okay.
published your first book or even your first two books,
Mhm.
because at that stage you're still learning the English speaking market and there's still tons to do there. Um, Translations take a lot of investment. That's not just money; it's also time, it's effort. Because I think what a lot of people underestimate is just that this is like an entire new market, and those readers expect quality just like they do for your English books. So you
Sure.
can't just get your book translated, publish it, and that's it. It's just same as in English. Nobody will find your book if you don't market it. Um, we no longer live in a world where you can just put your book on Amazon and that's it, and it sells. You need to do advertising or marketing or some kind of promotion, and that's the same for translations. And you need that headspace and the time to do that, or the money to outsource it. So I think it's something when you sell well enough to be able to afford translations, um, both with time and with money. And also, it helps to look at your sales at the moment for your English speaking books. Are they selling in other markets? Or if
Mhm.
all your sales are coming from the US or the UK or Australia or any English speaking market, and you don't see any sales at all from, let's say, Germany, where a lot of people do actually read in English, um, that's a sign that maybe for some reason your books might not be the most suitable for that for an international market, and you might have to investigate that further.
Okay, that's a good answer. When it comes to choosing the right market, so you focused heavily on Germany, and I'm curious, what makes that such a strong opportunity for indie authors, the German market in particular?
So I did my homework here and I pulled the latest numbers that I actually did for the book. Um, Germany is one of the three top book markets in the world. Um, and it
One of the
has,
3 top book markets in the world.
which
I
is
wanna
quite
see a show of
impressive.
hands, who knew that out there?
Uh-huh. um, when it comes to Europe, it is the top market in Europe in
Okay.
terms of book sales, and also the number of new published books. So, and book sales, they keep growing. I was just looking at the stats that the most recently published stats for the end of 2025, and sales were up. I think it was 7.3% growth or something like that, over 1 year to the next.
Year over year?
So
Okay.
there's definitely lots of growth happening.
Is that across
Um,
all formats as well, Skye?
that was for ebooks only.
Okay.
But there is actually most of the growth is still happening for print. There's a huge growth for audio too, though.
Yeah, I'll bet.
So pretty much all the formats are growing, and that's why there is such a big market. Now, I'm also doing other languages. I've got 30 or so books now in French, and I've got some in Italian and Spanish and Dutch. But I think Germany will always be my biggest market, just because size-wise, it is the biggest outside of, well, English and Chinese.
That's so interesting. I'm curious what lessons from the German market apply globally? I'm sure there are a lot of lessons, but do you have, like, just a couple that just really kinda stand out to you?
There are some trends that are reflected on other markets. For example, romantasy is the big thing in Germany just now too.
Okay.
Um, but they've got way more special editions in stores. So if you go to a German bookstore and look at the romance section, partly also the fantasy section, you will see so many sprayed edges and foiling and things that lots of indie authors are doing in English for signings and direct sales. And that you can see more and more in the shops here too, slowly, but it's not yet the standard. Well, last time I was in Germany in November, I just wanted to buy the entire bookshop because every book was so pretty. So I think there is a drive for more like
Mm,
pretty books for your bookshelf where it's not just
yeah.
about the content, but about the look as a package, um, which is something we can all learn from. And some of those German cover designs are just spectacular. And I have definitely drawn on that recently for one of my English special editions when I was wondering what to put on the sprayed edges and the inside pages. I looked at some German books because they have that on trend. Um, I think, yeah, lots of trends like audiobook growing. That's the same for us. New digital formats. Um,
Hmm.
I think quality is something that German readers put a very big emphasis on, because right now, with the rise of AI translations, they're getting less and less quality sometimes,
Hmm.
or at least it feels that way. So they are
You feel
getting
it's more
better at
so
filtering.
in Germany? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but with the quality requirement from German readers, do you feel that in Germany it's even higher than in perhaps in some other countries outside of the US?
I think so, yes. Because they've always been used to it. They have a very strong book retail um, scene, where bookshops are still a big thing. If you go on the high street there are tons of bookshops, a lot of independent bookshops too, not just chains. And bookshops will only obviously mostly take trad published books.
Hmm.
So readers who are still that demographic who go into the bookshop, they're used to trad published books that are perfectly edited, formatted, have covers that are completely on trend. And I think a lot of German readers expect the same thing online. So
Hmm.
yes, there are is that segment of KU readers who are quite willing to just like binge read anything they can get their hands on. Um, but there's also, especially on the wide retailers like Thalia, Hugendubel, there is that expectation of quality. And I've had that myself, like generally reviews can be a bit more scathing if they find a typo or something that they feel like is a translation error.
Really?
They
Okay.
will point that out to you.
Okay. Let's say that an author gets into Germany, but they're looking at expanding into the next market. How should they evaluate markets as they go from one country and then start expanding out wider and wider and wider?
I think, as I said, it's a good idea to look at where your sales are coming from at the moment.
Of course.
Um, and um, for example, if you are wide and you're on Kobo, you can look at your Kobo Plus sales too. And if your Kobo Plus is great in France, then French would be an obvious choice because my French translations just do amazing in Kobo Plus. They might not sell as much on other retailers as they do on Kobo Plus, but that's why I would look there first to see what is doing, which language is doing best on Kobo Plus, for example. Um, it's also just looking at retailers and seeing which genres are doing well at different retailers in different languages. Um, I write a bit niche sometimes, and
Mhm.
for example, my aliens that I have in Italian are doing pretty rubbish there compared to how they do in France and Germany and the English speaking world. And I clearly didn't do my research there because I should have gone with my romantasy first and translated that instead of the aliens. Um, so looking at what is trending in those different markets because it might not be what you expect or what you're
I
used to from your English speaking books, English
Interesting.
language books.
Um, and with that, I think it's a perfect time to bring up Beth's question here. Beth is asking, are there resources for learning about the trends in other countries? I imagine it can go beyond just reading trends and sales trends, but you can really break it down by categories as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of statistics sites, but a lot of those are quite trad focused, and I don't always find that as helpful.
Hmm.
Um, Something that I once did for French was just ask my newsletter, are there any French readers? And I got quite a few people who put up their hands. And I asked them, like, go to your bookshop and take some pictures and send them to me. At the time, I was actually looking for like things like special editions. What does that look like?
Yeah.
But just seeing what is out there helped a lot. But going to retailers, seeing what is featured on their front pages, and going to those
Mm.
not just Amazon, but going to the more locally geographically focused places. So for Germany, that would be like Thalia, for example.
Yes.
For French, you can look at Bookely, or you can um, brain fog.
That's okay.
Well, there's definitely like tons of different
Yeah.
retailers, and if you go to my website, I've got a list of all the retailers you can find my books on in the different countries, which helps as like a starting point, because there are lots of them. And there's like, before I started translation, I hadn't heard of most of them, because why would you?
Hmm.
Um, so looking at those and just chatting with other authors. There's lots of Facebook groups about translations now. I run 3 of them myself: one for one for German, one for French, one for Italian.
Hmm.
So when we get people all the time asking, like, how are, let's say, paranormal romance books doing just now, and then people will comment and give their impression. So I think there's a lot of communication between authors that helps.
Yeah, very good. We're always giving the advice to our authors out there to
Mhm.
just ask questions, keep asking
Yes,
questions, keep asking questions.
exactly.
And that's one of the things I love about this community because we have such a well-connected community here. Let me shift gears here a little bit, and let's start talking about smart entry strategies.
Mhm.
So, just by way of example, let's say that I'm a mid-list indie author. What's my smartest move? My smartest first move to when I start thinking about
Mhm.
translations? What should I do first?
Okay, first you have to decide on a language.
Right.
um, I would probably again look at your numbers, but if at a like the average author, I'd probably just say German, just because it is a big market and it's quite easy to break into, because there's more resources about German than there is for other languages. Um, and then look at which book do you want to do next. And once you've decided on that, it is, how are you going to get it translated? Because that's the big question. And um, when I wrote the first edition of my book, it was all about, well, machine translation at that time was just not good enough. There was like no question about that. I covered it as like a completionist thing, but it wasn't good enough in any way, shape, or form. Nowadays, that's changed a lot. So you have to decide whether you want to go with human translation, AI translation, or the happy medium, where
Okay.
you have an AI assisted translation. Now, I know a lot of people are completely anti AI, and that is fine.
Sure.
Um, you just get yourself a human translator. Now, the problem with that is they're expensive, so you need to budget.
Yeah.
Um, for German, you can have anything between 5 and 13 cents a word.
Okay.
Um, and most of the time, it is calculated by words in the target language. So, and there's quite a few languages that make you that are wordier than English. So
Mhm.
German books will pretty much always be longer than your English original, which also means they might be slightly more expensive than you budget in the beginning, because if you use your English word count, the German word count will be higher.
That's good insight.
Um, so you have to decide what to do. If you do an AI translations, there's lots of different tools now. However, be aware that, in my personal opinion, and I have tried AI translation myself, um, you can't quite publish it as is yet.
Yeah. You're still going to need that
There's
human touch.
Yes, yes,
Sure.
especially if it's fiction. If it's non-fiction, that's an entirely different beast. But as soon as you have any kind of humor, cultural references, or even in romance, getting the steam level, or like the right, it's
Hmm.
there's a lot of times where you just see an AI translation that just didn't get it quite right, which is like, it might be grammatically right and
Mhm.
it is readable, but it's not the quality that I would personally like to give to my readers. I want my translation to be the same quality as my English books. Now, there are people who don't see it that way, and for them, it's just like a quick way of making money, doing an AI translation, putting it out there, and that's it.
But our
Fine, that is
viewers
your
are all
business.
about craft and getting it right.
Yes, I like to get it right as much as I can, and that's why I do a lot of research for everything. And but yeah, get your translation done and then get your editing done. If it's a human translator, quite often they will either do the editing themselves, or they will have a cooperation with other translators where they share manuscripts after to have it edited. Sometimes they will ask you to find your own editor. Um, if it's AI, again, get it edited, preferably by a human.
Yeah.
um, and there are quite a few services now that specialize in editing for AI translations.
Okay.
And then it comes
Um,
to publishing. It's like lots of different steps to that.
Absolutely. So, given the choices that authors have now, and the
Mm.
options for translations, can you talk about what a realistic budget and timeline should look like for getting started? Underscore realistic budget.
Okay. So think about completely human translation, everything human. Um, you're looking at several $1,000s or euros, in the very least, depending on the length of your book, of course. Um, timeline. Um, my translator is fairly quick because at the moment I'm her only client. She's kind of on the way to retirement, and I am keeping her from retirement because she promised me that she will do my entire backlist,
Isn't
and I
that the
keep
thing
adding
when
more
you
books
find
to my
somebody you
backlist.
love? They're like, I'm going to retire.
Oh yeah, it's awful, which is why she's. I'm going to force her to do every single one of my books, and if I have to
Good for
change
you.
out in my
You should
basement,
support her. Okay.
it's you didn't hear that. I don't have a basement. But yeah, she. So if you have a translator, keep them close, make them happy. But it can be several months depending on the length of your book. So, but at the same time, you can use that time to set up a pre-order, do your research,
Yes.
start a newsletter. Um, again, the same strategies apply as for an English book. With my English books, I very often have a newsletter magnet, that is either a prequel or a bonus scene, and I do the same thing across languages, especially in the beginning, because you want to build a newsletter. You want to have exactly the same things that you do for your English books. And to be honest, my German newsletter, the opening rates are like 3 times as good as my English one. It is amazing.
Interesting.
It is probably one of my best promo tools because I get like sales every single newsletter I send, and yeah, quite substantial ones. So I love my newsletter to bits.
Anecdotally, I just wanted to let the audience know here. There have been several conferences just in chit chats in the hallways with authors when I've heard them say, yeah, my books are selling really well in Germany. But this is all making sense now after
Yes.
speaking with you. Okay. So this is all painting a picture for me. But I do wanted to talk a bit more about AI and translation because I'm sure it's on top of mind with a lot of authors out there.
Yeah.
And AI tools are improving fast, and they're making things more accessible and more affordable to more authors. And I'm assuming, as you've already pointed out as well, that human translation is still the gold standard. I'm sure it always will be the gold standard. Um, but I'm curious to understand where you say AI tools fitting into an author's workflow today in terms of translation, if at
Mhm.
all. Yeah,
Um,
I'll stop there.
so I'm very much I like Joanna Penn's phrasing, an AI assisted author. So I am not against AI at all. But I do think you have to be careful that you don't use it for things that it isn't good enough for yet. And so the actual translation, I think, if you use AI for that, it needs a human touch. I can just give you an example here that I just recently had with my translator, where she came back to me. There was a scene in one of my alien books where they go on a honeymoon. And there's a pun there because it's aliens. And so the alien guy thinks they're going to an actual moon. Now, in German, the word honeymoon has nothing to do with moons. So that entire joke wouldn't have worked if you just translated it literally. So my translator got in touch and said, here's a solution for this that I came up with. Do you like this pun? AI wouldn't have known that. And AI is getting better and better and getting the nuance right. But unless you specifically instruct it to write new scenes, it would very much struggle with stuff like that. So the entire joke would have just been lost. And yes, it's just one joke in a very funny, otherwise funny book, but still, it would not be again to the quality that I aspire to. However, there are definitely lots of ways where even if your translation is human edited or human done, like doing a newsletter. So in my French and my Italian newsletter, I generally use AI to translate my newsletter text, and I have a disclaimer at the bottom. I'm very sorry. This newsletter has been translated by AI. However, all my books are human translated. This is just so I can give you regular updates. Otherwise, that just wouldn't be possible because my translator doesn't have the capacity for me to go to her every week with a new newsletter and be like, "Can you please translate this?" So things like that, or social media, or even understanding things. If you have a German website, and even with like the most browsers have translating tools built
Mhm.
in, but even if that doesn't make sense to you, that's a good way to like copy and paste that into AI and ask it for a summary or something like that. So there's lots of different ways you can use it. Um, if you are so inclined. It
Mhm.
is not necessary either. It's just I think everyone has to make their own decisions with that. I think in a few years' time, it might be at a standard where, or maybe even just it's developed so fast recently, it is
Yeah,
very hard to predict. But I think in the future, it may be able to do a complete translation for fiction that gets most of the nuance right. I'm still a bit worried that it might not have the same heart
sure.
and kind of passion as a human translated thing. There's also things like lots of European languages have formal and informal you. So, for example, in my romances, most of the time in German, they would first have the formal version because they don't know each other, and at some point they will switch to the informal. In my translator, then will generally add a little scene where they either propose that to each other or if they switch naturally, where one of them has like an internal thought, oh, we've switched to that. I agree or I don't agree. Because that is such a thing that happens in society.
Yeah.
It's weakened a bit over time, but yeah, my grandma in Germany, she had friends who she was still using the formal you with for decades because the older one hadn't offered it to her. So it is like there's strict rules in society for that. Um, and again, that's something where unless you prompt the AI to, in chapter 5, in that paragraph, add an extra 2 sentences where it switches from formal to informal,
Mhm.
it doesn't know when to do that. And so it just needs the guidance. I think with AI in general, it needs a very good prompting and very good guidance.
For sure. And if I'm hearing you correctly, Sky, so what I'm hearing is that, hey, if you're going to use it for things like your newsletter, maybe some of the text in your website, and you can use it for your books, but you're going to need that human editor just to make sure that you've got it polished and ready for reader consumption.
Yeah. At least that's my personal view. I know there's people who are quite happy to just put it into AI, but yeah, it just depends on what your goals are.
Gotcha. Okay, let's switch gears one more time here, or actually a few more times, but with this next time, um, oh, this topic is top of mind with me. And because there are so many people who are trying to exploit authors today, so many scammers. So I want to switch gears and talk about avoiding scams and low quality work. There are a lot of translators out there and different services out there. So, how can authors spot red flags when it comes to people who just want to siphon money out of our wallets?
The easiest red flag is probably it being too cheap. If it's like way below any quote you've seen elsewhere, it is very unlikely to be real. Um, but also, if people come to you, I mean, most of the time, cold calling is not, yeah, the best quality either. Um, I always suggest to everyone to get a sample translation done or a sample edit. Um, now, a lot of people will be asking, like, well, who checks that if I don't speak the language? But again, that's something where you can use your existing readers. You will be surprised how many German, French, Italian readers you have on your newsletter or on your social media. And again, we're talking, this is translation is for something once you're already established to a certain degree. So once you have that audience, ask your audience. And most readers will be so happy to help you, especially if you send them some swag or a free book at the end. That's how I found some of my better readers for different languages. By just asking in my newsletter, is there anyone who is a native speaker, wants to read this book in that language? Here you go. Here's a signed copy of the book afterwards. And yeah, that's the easiest way because I know most people won't be speaking multiple languages, so it's hard to do it yourself and it's hard to rely on others. There are services that can check things for you, like translations, but at the same time, then you first have to vet that service as
I was
well.
just going to
So,
pop up Linda's question here. Thanks, Linda. So Linda asked, for those of you who are going to listen to the podcast later, is there a listing or society for legitimate AI editors, translation
um,
editors in particular?
okay, I'm not 100% sure about the AI editors. I know for, I mean, there's always places like Alliance of Independent Authors who have a lot of services listed. Readsy, which have a database of translators. Some of those are now also AI assisted. I was talking to Readsy recently for my book research. Um, Editors and specifically, I think that's one where it's probably good to just go by word of mouth. If you're not sure about a service, and again, if it's too cheap or anything, ask around. Has anyone else used this? Because that will give you the best idea.
Okay. Is so too cheap is one flag potentially, but how about like too expensive? Like,
Mhm. There is too expensive, however. This has changed a bit, especially since I first published the book in 2021. Back then, a lot of translators were still used to working with trad publishers who were
mhm,
paying a lot, and actually, they also had a lot of royalty share agreements with them. So they'd pay a lot plus royalty share, and a lot of them were still used to that and expecting the same from indie authors. That's changed a lot because they now know most of us don't want to pay royalty share, and most of us don't have the cash that trad publishers have. Um, so sometimes price is just a way of showing their quality, or that they have done translations for the big five or big name authors.
gotcha.
They only
Okay.
see, okay, all these trad published books and their prices are really high. That's probably why. If they don't have a portfolio at all and their prices are super high, I would question why that is.
Okay. And ask for references and all that kind of stuff too.
Yeah, exactly. Always do your homework. Never just trust anyone because they give you a great offer. Because I have, especially in my one-to-one consultations, I've had so many people. It hurts to see that who got bad translations, published them, then got bad reviews, didn't get the sales, never made their money back. They had to have them retranslated,
Oh,
and it's just so painful to see, and it's awful. And I don't want anyone else to go through that.
yeah, we don't take kindly to scammers trying to scam,
No.
this community out there. And they're, I mean, especially with AI now, it is
Mhm.
ridiculous what they are
Oh yeah.
employing and then getting out into the world.
Mhm.
So I'm going to bring up another comment and question here from the audience because this is a perfect segue into some marketing questions. And this is from Like the Bell VT. Thank you for your question here. She asks, how do you go about promoting a translation? Are you treating it as its own unique book, or do you market it along with the English version?
That is a great question. It is a completely different version. It's night and day. Yes, some of the readers in other countries will be able to read in English and they might read the original. This especially happens if you have a series and they're waiting for the German or French or whatever version to release. You might see an increase in sales in the English version of that book because they can't wait. They don't want to wait. And they just get the original. But otherwise, it's completely separate. Now, you can reuse some of your marketing material that you use for your English version. And that's actually one thing I recommend. For example, for newsletters, people often ask, like, I don't speak the language. What am I supposed to write in my newsletter? Just go back to when you published that book in English. See what you put into your newsletter there. Did you write about how you got the idea or how excited you are for the release? Or did you even just share a few pretty cat pictures or whatever? So you can reuse that content. Or if you have quote graphics, translate those or like look up the equivalent quote in the translation so you don't have to start from scratch. And I think the good thing is if you've done the promotion in English, you will know about things like social media, ads, marketing, newsletters. So it's not like you're a completely new author, but at the same time, you are a new author to that audience because if they only read in their own language, they will have never heard of you before. So you might be a huge name author in English, but suddenly you're a baby author again, except that you have the knowledge. And that's the big difference. So you're not starting from zero in terms of how to do things. So my books, they all have their own entry on my website. I sometimes have websites specifically in that language. Um, Depending on how well the books do in that language, they get their own website. Otherwise, it's part of my main website. They all have their own newsletter. Um, they have their own graphics. Now, social media, in an ideal world, I would have a social media channel for every pen name in every language. Unfortunately, I can't split myself into several parts. So at the moment, again, I prioritize. I have one German Instagram channel for a pen name because that series did actually better in German than it did in English. It was
Hmm.
ridiculous, the difference. And so I decided, okay, now as a reward, you're getting an Instagram and Facebook account in that language for that pen name. Um, but in general, with social media, I'm a bit more hesitant just because of time. But It is a completely new version, and you have to start from scratch. If you upload to retailers, you have to tell the retailers about that new book.
Hmm.
Um, Now, assuming you're white, for example, um, if it's a French book or an Italian book or a Dutch book, you can go to Kobo. They have teams in those languages where you can introduce yourself and say, "I've got these translations. Is there anything you can do for me?" Um, Apple does promotions in different languages. Drafted Digital has a wonderful promo form that you can fill in for
Thank you
everything.
so much. I was just about to say we do
Oh, I,
promotes.
I keep sharing that promo form to everyone.
Thank you so much. Good. Oh, Megan on our
And
promo team would, she would love to hear that.
she can send me some chocolates.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm starving. Then for Tolino, huge German. It's not a retailer; it's a distributor, but it's also a network of different retailers that got together. I love Tolino. They have an amazing promotion and marketing team that you can only reach when you're direct, and they have got my books into their bookstores, like actually on the table in hundreds of German bookstores and things like that. So
Amazing.
I love their team. Them. So stuff like that. Different retailers have different teams in different languages, and you can reach them and do that. But don't assume that because your English book did well, that readers in other languages will know about it, or you don't have to do any marketing. No, it's completely separate. Occasionally mention that there is a translation because there will be some crossover, especially among younger readers who will generally be quite fluent in English if they're in Europe. But yeah, it is separate. Sorry, long
Okay.
answer for the question.
Okay. So I'm hearing that a lot of the same tactics, ads, promos, and newsletters translate pretty well internationally. Um, what's one marketing strategy that worked surprisingly well for you in a foreign market? And then if you can give an example of that, but then also maybe an example of what didn't work for you that you expected would.
Ooh, that's a hard one. I think I already mentioned my newsletter. That was definitely one where I was very positively surprised how well that worked
Great.
across languages. Um, I think organic reach surprised me at how little it worked for Italian. So I personally, I don't run ads at all, really, except for some of my children's books. So I mostly rely on organic reach, on metadata optimization, on retailer promos, social media, newsletter, all that. Cross promotion with authors. Oh yeah, cross promotion with authors is another good one, which works. However, um, you have to look at who you cross promote with. So there's more and more, for example, book funnel promos for different languages. However, if you look at them, pretty much all the authors taking part will be authors of translations. So you are through that not necessarily getting the reach of German authors. For that, you need other channels, and it's much harder, to be honest. I went to my first German book signing in November, and I was just struck by how different everything is there, like the way it's set up, how they communicate with each other. In English, a lot of it is Facebook groups and stuff like that. And as there are Facebook groups for different languages for authors. But quite a lot of the communication seemed to be like more behind closed doors, more in like smaller circles. And also like the level of discussion was very different. Where in English I quite know which groups to go to for like the big name authors or those who are like doing this really as a business, and the other groups where everyone is very welcome, whether you've published one book or none at all or 100. But yeah, I think cross promotion is a good one if you find the right authors. And for French, for example, I just reached out to some French authors. I looked at my also boards. I Googled similar my genre, looked at who's out there, and then I sent them an email and was like, "Hi, I've got this new book." Some of them didn't respond. Some weren't willing to swap with a translated book, but some were very willing, and we did swaps. And actually, those were probably the most effective because those authors have that established audience. They know what they're doing. So I think don't just be around English-speaking authors. Be willing to take that step towards the language that you're translating into.
That's very good advice. We often recommend author collaborations when it comes to our sales. Like like
Mhm.
sales at the Smashword store, and how well like the authors who are collaborating the most are the ones who tend to do better in those
Yes.
sales. So it's nice to hear that author collaborations across languages and countries and cultures
Mhm.
also perform well.
Yes. Um, I've been wanting to organize like a box set, a multi-author box set for German. Um, so things like that I'm still experimenting with of how effective they are, but I can seeing how really popular my box sets are in other languages, I bet it's the same thing. So things like that, sometimes it's worth getting in touch with other authors and seeing is anyone interested in doing this first in series box set and stuff like that.
Great. Can we talk a little bit about return on investment, scaling, and reality in the next 4 or 5 minutes? Uh,
I will try my best.
okay. And this is kind of this question. I don't know. This isn't one of my best questions here because it's hard to have a good sharp answer. But how long
Mhm.
should authors expect before they earn back on their translation investment?
It very much depends. This is like a how long is a piece of string
Great
question.
question, Jim. I know. Yeah.
Mhm. Um, if you used a expensive translator, your book is very long, and you spend 7, 8 thousand dollars on that, um, you can still sometimes make your money back within the first month, or it can take a year. My aim generally, at least for German, is to make my money back within the first 1 to 3 months.
Okay.
For some series, that's easier than for others. It also depends if it's the first in a series or further along. Um, However, then once you add, even I've had series where maybe the last book in the series hadn't made its money back yet, but then I published the box set, and then the series is way in the plus. Um, it depends.
Yes.
If you use AI, obviously your upfront cost is going to be a lot less. Um, and if it's a good quality translation, and you might be making money from day 1 or 2 or 3. Um, it just depends whether you are interested in making money immediately from the start as like a big spike, and then maybe not so much after once the reviews come in and maybe the quality isn't as good. Um, or if you want the long game. And that's always been my strategy. I'm always for the marathon rather than the sprint. I'd
Okay.
rather have a slow but steady.
Well,
Um,
and with that, Scott, let me pause you there for a second, because you mentioned like when the reviews start coming in, then you can sort of reevaluate. So,
mhm.
at what point do you know that translation for your books becomes a repeatable, scalable part of your business? Like when do you just know?
Um, I think once you, for example, you have a series and all the books have made their money back within a certain time frame and it's reliable, and that is a good sign that clearly your readers want more. But it's also things like social evidence. Is anyone posting about your book on social media? Are the reviews good? Are people getting in touch? Are people subscribing to your newsletter? It's not just about the money sometimes. Sometimes it's also just, if even if your book, because it was really expensive to translate, hasn't made its money back, but you suddenly have 500 people on your newsletter list that weren't there before, that is clearly evidence that you're doing something right. It really just depends how much disposable income you have to play around with. I've talked to people who have had published lots of translations and still haven't made their money back, but it's just an investment. It's a long-term investment. It's the same with audiobooks, where you
Sure.
just sometimes can't predict.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
Okay. Um, w- this hour or this episode is flying by. Two more questions for you, then we'll let you go. But I'm curious if you had to give one rule for when is the right time to go global for authors, what would it be?
Um, when you are able to lose the money and the time that you invest, so when it doesn't hurt. If you are living month to month on your author income, um, don't do it, because you don't want to. Yes, it can be an investment that pays off, but it can also not be. So please don't go into debt for it. But if you are able to spend a few thousand on this and not make them back, or not make them back within a year, and that's fine for you, then go for it.
Okay, perfect.
That was a
And
short, very condensed answer.
no, I love the sharp answers. That's perfect. And one mistake you'd urge every author to avoid. Obviously, don't go into debt.
Mhm. Treating translations as inferior products, by, for example, not doing a research, giving them exactly the same cover as the English one, not seeing that the market might be different, by just putting them out there and then ignoring them. You need to treat them as that really good question was earlier. You need them to treat them as a separate product. They are not the same, and you can't just assume that everything that works for your English books also works for your translations. You need to do your homework and find out what the cover trends are, what the blurb trends are, what are the conventions. For example, in German, you need an impressum. That's an imprint in the beginning with different legal requirements. Things like that. Is the spine different? Like some books in different languages have the title turned around by 180 degrees, stuff like that. If you don't know that and you just put your book out there without doing your research, that can like backfire very quickly.
I'm sure that there are a bunch of nuances out there that we just don't even know to ask you about. So if there are authors out there who are watching us talk right now or who listen to the podcast later on, if they want to get in touch with you and ask you some questions or book some consulting time with you, can I send them your way to your website?
Please do. It's skyemckinnon.com/authors, where you can find.
Did I get it right?
Perfect. Excellent. And there you can find my book about German translations. You can also find anything about my consultations. You can always just send me an email or message me on Facebook. At the moment, because I'm running a Kickstarter campaign, so I am super busy and less available than I usually am. But after the 6th or 7th of April, 6th of April, I will be calm again and I can deal with everything else. But yeah, I'm always happy to help. You can also join the Facebook groups if you look for marketing German indie book translations, marketing French indie book translations, and marketing Italian translations. You can join those groups and just join the conversation.
Perfect. Okay. Well, we're going to start wrapping up here. And I want to remind folks, if you enjoyed this episode, if you can do us a favor and like and share this with your author friends, we would really appreciate it. We're beaming Skye in all the way from Scotland. And so we apologize. We know that there are some audio issues. I was trying to, wiggle around some of the wires and stuff here just to make sure we could fix it as this was ongoing. But hopefully we can get a transcript of this after the episode concludes. So thank you for your patience and for sticking with us, you guys. If you are curious about what our upcoming episodes are going to be and who the guests are, please consider bookmarking D2D Live, that website. That's D2DLive.com. And finally, if you're just joining us for the first time and you are maybe investigating self-publishing for the first time, why not go to Draft to Digital and sign up for your author account today and really dive into the indie publishing community. Skye, I want to thank you once more. We're bringing this to a close. If you can hang out for just a minute backstage, have some snacks back there and a drink. For everybody else, thank you again for joining us week in and week out. I love seeing our repeat offenders out there joining us in the comments section, and I love seeing new names too. So welcome to the new guys out there. Thank you again. And for everybody else, we hope to see you here at the same time, same place next week. Thanks again, everybody. Bye-bye.
Ebooks are great, but there's just something about having your words in print. Something you can hold in your hands, put on a shelf, sign for a reader. That's why we created D2D Print, a print-on-demand service that was built for you. We have free, beautiful templates to give your book a pro look, and we can even convert your ebook cover into a full wraparound cover for print. So many options for you and your books. And you can get started right now at drafttodigital.com.